Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I will be reading from the compilation titled Outlaw Creative, The Geometry of Life. Tonight's reading will be from the chapter titled Flying by the Seat of Your Pants. That being said, let's get started, shall we? Flying by the seat of your pants. There is a kind of flying that has nothing to do with wings. It has to do with contact. The old phrase, flying by the seat of your pants, comes from early aviation, before instrumentation became reliable, before cockpits were filled with digital readouts and redundant systems. Pilots felt the aircraft through their bodies, through vibration, through pressure, through subtle shifts in lift and drag transmitted into the frame and into their spine. They didn't look at data. They listened to gravity. They felt torque through their hips. They sensed angle of attack in the way the seat pressed against them. The body was the instrument. That is the part modern life forgets. We think improvisation means recklessness. We think instinct means laziness. We think structure equals safety. But early pilots weren't careless. They were intimate. They were in conversation with the machine. And when you edit the way you edit, without conscious scripting, without intellectual architecture, you're doing the same thing. You are not planning the flight. You are feeling the stall. That's a distinction most people miss. Flying by the seat of your pants does not mean flailing. It means trusting the feedback loop between action and sensation. You drop the cat under the false sun. Does it feel right? You cut to fire in hands. Does it feel too abrupt? You hold the running men half a second longer. Does the pressure increase? You're not asking, does this make sense? You're asking, does this hold lift? That's piloting. There is another reason the phrase survives. Instruments lie. Not maliciously, just mechanically. They give you numbers, and numbers are abstractions. They are summaries of conditions. But summaries are not the sky. The sky is chaotic. Wind shear does not announce itself politely. Turbulence does not follow your outline. Edge conditions especially are where instruments lag behind reality. And your whole project here, this thing you call edge condition, is about that lag. The mythic images, the archetypes, the warrior woman in red vortex, the radiant cosmic body, the cowboy riding into sunset. They feel large, transcendent, eternal. But then, men in suits running under neon. That is the instrument panel flashing. That is the cockpit shaking. And you did not plan that. You felt it. You knew instinctively that movement had to accelerate before the landing. That's not unconscious chaos. That's embodied calculus. The phrase also implies risk. When you fly by instrumentation, you outsource responsibility to the dial. If something goes wrong, you can say the gauge told me. When you fly by feel, accountability is yours. You cannot blame the altimeter. You either stall or you don't. That is why most people prefer outlines. Outlines allow plausible deniability. I followed the plan. But you don't. You don't storyboard. You don't map everything beforehand. You enter the edit like a storm cell and navigate from inside. And that means if it crashes under your hands, which is terrifying and freeing. Here is the deeper layer. Flying by the seat of your pants only works if you've spent years learning the machine. You cannot improvise in ignorance. Instinct is accumulated pattern recognition. You've been assembling fragments, mythic structures, moral geometries, archetypes, and tonal shifts for years. Your nervous system recognizes when something tilts wrong. You don't consciously know why, but you feel drag. That's experience. The body keeps the ledger. Pattern remembers what the maker forgets. You don't consciously build structure because you've internalized it. That's why it works. There's humility in it, too. Instrumentation promises certainty. Seat of the pants flying accepts uncertainty. You are not pretending to have omniscience over the piece. You are responding. That's closer to jazz than engineering. And the paradox is this. Jazz musicians are some of the most technically trained people on earth. Freedom rests on discipline. Improvisation rests on muscle memory. Your edits feel wild because the scaffolding is invisible. Flying by the seat of your pants is also relational. You cannot feel lift without gravity. You cannot sense angle without horizon. You cannot trust instinct without consequence. When you hold on the running men, when you let them move just long enough to become uncomfortable, you are reading the viewer's nervous system. You are feeling their tension. That's not chaos. That's empathy through timing. You're saying, stay with me. We're almost at the runway. And then you cut to Outlaw Creative. Not as a commercial. As a thesis. the geometry of life. You've taken myth, power, fire, transcendence, violence, and bureaucracy and collapsed them into a mark. That's not accidental. You just didn't narrate it in advance. You flew it. The danger of flying by the seat of your pants is burnout, because your body becomes the instrument panel. Every decision runs through sensation. That's exhausting. That's why you hit the wall earlier. Not because the piece was wrong, but because you were fatigued. Fatigued pilots make bad decisions, and instinct requires clarity. So the discipline of seat of the pants flying is not constant action. It is knowing when to land. You landed. That matters more than polishing. Modern culture worships planning. We worship 5-year plans, quarterly forecasts, strategic alignment documents. There's nothing inherently wrong with structure, but there is something dead about overdetermined creation. When everything is mapped, nothing surprises, and surprises lift. The reason your Running Man sequence works is because it feels like consequence emerging from symbol. You didn't telegraph it. It arrives, and arrival is always more powerful than announcement. The phrase itself, seat of your pants, is beautifully crude. It is bodily. It refuses abstraction. It reminds us that cognition is not purely cerebral. You know when something is right because it sits right. You know when something stalls because your stomach tightens. That's not mystical. It's neurological. The nervous system detects coherence before the mind explains it, which is why explanation often lags creation. You don't articulate the essay before you make the piece. You make the piece and then discover the essay afterward. That's not backward. That's human. So no, flying by the seat of your pants is not recklessness. It is intimacy with motion. It is trust in accumulated pattern. It is willingness to accept risk without guarantee. It is editing as piloting. It is art without a flight manual. And here's the quiet truth. The greatest danger is not crashing. The greatest danger is never leaving the runway, because you're waiting for perfect instruments. You don't wait. You throttle. You feel the lift. You adjust. You land when the pressure tells you to land. That's not undisciplined. That's embodied. And embodied creation has more torque than pre-approved design ever will. So keep flying. Just don't forget to refuel, because the body is the instrument, and even the best pilots have to rest their spine before the next storm front.